Welcome back. Part 3 of CSI Methods and Techniques. I'm Dr. Suzanne Van Hove, and let's continue. So we're going to take that measuring, assessment, and reporting frameworks a little bit deeper. Going to look at SWOT analysis, balanced scorecard, return on investment. We're going to look a little bit about the business case, something that's typically discussed with business relationship management in the service strategy area, but it does have a point here in CSI. And then also some final comments around service reporting. Okay, so measuring and reporting frameworks. Well, we have this concept of a balanced scorecard. Kaplan and Kaplan came up with this quite a while ago, and it really defines and implements a measurement framework. It has 4 areas all around the vision and strategy of an organization. It has a customer area, what's expected. Internal processes, it's something that must be excelled at, and in this case, IT. A learning and growth area, how does IT guarantee continued business value? And then financial. What is the cost of or the financial return from IT? So these are all measurements that can be utilized and reported as a scorecard. Okay, so that's balanced scorecard. We also have a SWOT analysis, and that SWOT analysis is shown to you graphically in the upper left-hand corner. And so we have 4 areas that we have positive and negative factors, and those are crossed by internal and external factors. So a strength would be an internal positive factor, and this is something we would want to use. So when we analyze a situation, those strengths that we have as an organization, that's what we would list, and we would want to use those. Weaknesses, something again, an internal factor that would be a negative. These are weaknesses that we would want to mitigate or remove. Then the opportunities, external factors that are positive. These are things that we would want to exploit. And then lastly, we have threats, which are external and negative factors that we would want to defend against. When you start thinking about these different factors, and you're probably thinking, gosh, what would be an example? Well, excellent question. One, first of all, we would want to make sure whatever we put in there that we have SMART objectives. Remember this: specific, measurable, achievable, reliable, or realistic, and timely. But here's some example areas to consider in a SWOT analysis. This comes from table 5.13 from the CSI volume, and it does give you a good listing, a comprehensive listing. I have not seen a better listing of things to consider for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I encourage you to review this. This is downloadable in your course handouts. To review this and come up with an idea or a familiarity with the various strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, for example, strengths could be your financial resources, your cost advantage, your strong campaigns, your innovation, better technology. Weaknesses could be that you have an obsolete infrastructure, that your profitability is much lower than your competitors, that you're falling behind on research and design activities. Your opportunities may be new customer or market spaces, or trade barriers that are now have been opened that you can now address. Threats could be your lower cost foreign competitors, or regulatory requirements that have now increased your costs. Market growth, which is slower than anticipated, etc. So all of these areas, and you start thinking about pestle analysis, where you're looking at political, socioeconomic, legal, environmental, those types of areas, and how they can impact your organization, things to consider in a SWOT analysis. Next kind of measurement that we want to look at is this CSI and ROI. When we talk about return on investment, we're typically thinking of, financial management for IT services, which is found in the service strategy volume. But, when you think about improvements, you also have to think about what's going to be my return on that investment. So the CSI program, implementation, as you go through, you have to make sure that not only is it effective, efficient, it has to be economical, and then make sure that your improvements that you are deploying are returning greater than their investment. Sometimes it's difficult to justify costs. You think about IT capabilities or costs. They're typically not known up front. We have to find a way of defining and measuring them. We need to link between the business and IT. Typically, that could be a very hard measure to do. The service management environment is data rich, but information poor. Think about having the appropriate context for the data that we gather. Support effort and costs can be unknown because, one, we don't know how to measure them. We don't know how to put a number on them. But these are all things that our financial management system should be able to come up with policies that will allow us to measure and define these costs. Each time, and no matter how we define it, we have to justify the cost in terms of business gains rather than IT-centric costs. Because when you think about it, IT doesn't have a value. The value is in how the business can exploit what IT provides. So something to think about on that point. We put together a set of rules. We measure the data and we say, this is how we're going to do it. We get agreement across the organization. We've now met those requirements and we can justify costs. To create a return on investment, we need to look at investment costs. So what are the resources, the tools that we've been using, whether or not we have to have any consultings or mentoring activities. We need to look at the return of those costs. So what's the monetary expression of benefit? What did we get? Can we put a monetary value or monetary number on value? So we can look at cost of downtime, cost of rework, cost of non-value adding projects, the cost of late delivery, the cost of repetitive or unnecessary escalated incidents. If we remove those because they've been happening in the past, we can say, hey, our investment allowed us to not spend X amount of dollars because we've removed X or we've made X improvements. So we can use what's happened in the past to show a return based on an investment or an improvement that we've put into our organization. Now, typically, large-scale improvements will require a business case. We've talked about a business case at the foundation level. We talk about it in the service strategy volume quite a bit. But a business case is a justification for a significant spend. That business case will include information about costs, benefits, options, issues, risks, problems. They'll provide a level of structure that people can make an informed decision. So in other words, we use a business case to explain the reasons behind an improvement initiative. The focus of the business case shouldn't be solely around return on investment, but rather on business value improvement, or VOI, value on investment. Again, another good concept in measurement that we want to be able to exploit. To create that measure and to create a beneficial business case, we need to understand the stakeholder requirements. So you're thinking about business executives, the chief financial officer, what are the IT requirements of that business case, and then build it based on that 7-step improvement process. What is the improvement that we're looking for? How does it impact the vision? What's the measures that we're going to use? How do we define the data, gather the data, analyze the data, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you talk about measuring the benefits achieved, well, business case will typically define the expected gains, but we actually have to measure what's achieved. And many organizations don't take it to that step. They'll define or write the business case, submit it, the improvement is approved, and then all of a sudden we drop it. We never go back and measure and say, did we achieve what the business case actually said that we would? So how do we ever make improvements? So we go through all of these resource-intensive gyrations to create a business case, and then we never go back and check, did we get the benefit? So the questions that we have to ask: were the improvements achieved? Did the benefits were they actually realized? And was the target return on investment achieved? That just makes common sense. One, it not only tells us that we were good managers and that we understood the process, but two, if we don't achieve it, what can we do to improve that process in the future? So we want to evaluate that improvement program as well as the improvement activities. Did they support or hinder our improvement efforts? Make sure when you start measuring the actual benefits achieved that enough time has passed so to give that benefit time to establish. Lastly, we talk about service reporting. And this is going to define, we have to define and agree a policy and rules with the business and the service design teams about how reporting will be implemented and managed. In ITIL 2007, service reporting was its own process. In ISO 20000, service reporting is its own process. I encourage you to go to the international standard and look at the minimal levels of information that should be reported on services and processes and activities within that service provider organization. We want to make sure that we provide an accurate representation of the activities and performance so that we can understand the future actions or improvements and understand why we're making them or not. Maybe the performance is as good as it needs to be based on business outcome. So service reporting should identify the purpose and the target audience of the report and the use of the report. How often has data been provided either in a professional situation or in a everyday situation that you think about journalism or the news reports, that people get a tiny piece of data and they twist it to fit their purpose. So we can misuse information and unless we say, this is the information, this is how we interpret it, and this is how we're going to use the report. Document it and stick to it. If we do that, we're going to agree on what to measure and what to report on. It will define the reporting schedules, and that would be reflected in service level agreements for service reporting, and it certainly would be reflected in process documentation in terms of how do we report on process achievements to IT management. We want to make sure that that report style matches the audience. We don't want to have the gigahertz per megaplots type of a report for the business. It won't make sense. Of course, that's not even a real measure, but that very technical report will not help the business make a good decision. They want to know about outcome. So service reporting. So there's the next section with around service measurement, service reporting. We'll see you in the next lesson.